All right, everybody. Welcome back, episode 34, and we got a good one.
Yeah,
one we're really excited for. The man, an absolute legend in the fishing world, Jay Yelas is gonna join us today.
crazy.
And I'm so stoked for this one. So, like I said, Jay Yelas, with us tonight, and man, like. I'm kind of lost for words. You know,
I know it's almost weird.
It is.
We were talking to him before, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, Jay Yelas."
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
so cool.
I mean, an absolute legend in the fishing world. A guy that all of us have looked up to. If you follow fishing or BASS for a long time, you know the name and kind of what he's about. So definitely stoked to have him with us today. So
yeah.
We're going to bring him in here in a second. But before that, if you get a chance, go ahead and check out the merch store.
Yeah.
It's up. It's accessible on both desktop and mobile devices. It's extremely easy to use. And like everywhere, we accept all major forms of payment, including PayPal and, Visas, debits, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So check it out. Get you a shirt, hat, some stickers that are designed by the one and only Jordan there. So yeah, exactly. Grab you some stuff. Grab you some stuff from the store. We appreciate it. Man. Also the social. Facebook, Instagram, and of course YouTube, all Tackle and Tacos, and tackleandtacos.com where the store is at. So that's that's the goods. Trying to keep this intro short and sweet so we can so we can get to the man, the man himself. But before we do, I say we definitely have to give a shout out to Curtis with the Working Class Bow Hunters. Just put down another gigantic buck. And
once again, he is tagged out for Illinois, bucked out.
Yeah, man. What a deer slayer he is. And if anybody's seen the pictures that he's posted so far over at the Working Class Bowhunter podcast page, you can see this absolute giant that looks every bit of 170 inches plus, but I hear he measured just about an inch and a half shy of that.
Inch and 2/8 or however you do that, with measurements. You don't really do half inch, whatever. But crazy.
Yeah, man, that's wild. So shout out to Kurt for putting down his personal best archery buck. Man, what a season he's having. So shout out to him.
Congrats, buddy.
Yeah, shout out to him and really all the Working Class guys. They are on it this year.
Yeah.
Putting down some awesome deer. So we appreciate you guys. Heck of a job.
Congrats, Kurt. Congrats. So let's get into it. Usually we would have more of like story time, like we would have conversation and we would walk through things, the three of us, which side note, if you're listening right now, you'll notice that you don't hear Lola's lovely voice. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice that you don't see lovely Lola sitting to my right. So not to get like too deep on it, whatever. I kind of debated whether I wanted to say anything about it, but I will. I think a lot of the people who listen to this, I think everybody who listens to our podcast and we talk to, they're good people. And so if you're the praying type of human being, we wouldn't be opposed to you praying for Lola a little bit. It's nothing like life threatening or whatever. But she went to the doctor today. She's been having weird pains and stuff in her hand. And it turns out she needs like 3 different surgeries in her wrist. And she has a trigger finger thing and all this, and it just kind of sucks. And so she was hanging out with her mom tonight and she's just kind of understandably a little like sad and whatever. And I was like, dude, and she was stoked. Like she was stoked to talk to Jay. But I was like, seriously, take the night off, relax, whatever. Me and Nate will hold it down or attempt to. But
that's for sure.
Yeah. It kind of sucks without you. But we're gonna move on. We're gonna get into the meat of it. And as Nate so accurately said, tonight we have an absolute legend on the show. I don't know why he agreed to do our podcast, but I'm pretty dang excited about it.
Heck
and I'm talking about not like it's not like, oh yeah, he's done some pretty big things. Like this dude is a legend, and that's the actual word, and I can prove it to you. Not that like fishing and holding a rod and reel is the only thing he's ever done with his life, and we'll get into some of that later too. But let me prove it to you, at least as it relates to the bass fishing world, who this dude is. So he's the 2002 Bassmaster Classic champion, right? That alone, winning a classic, to me, there's no such thing as a classic champ who's like not legendary. You win the classic, you're a legend. That's just kind of how it works. Then he follows it up the next year with a Bassmaster Angler of the Year title. What the?
Yeah,
like, who does that?
Next year. Yeah,
that's nonsense. He's been in the classic 16 times. That's crazy.
Yeah,
16 times.
And if anybody doesn't really know the classic and what it is, everybody refers to it as the Super Bowl of bass fishing, and that's what it is. It is the absolute pinnacle of the sport.
Yep.
Everybody who wants to be a tournament angler or strives to be a professional angler, that's where they want to get to. Is the classic. So
and he's been in 16 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, to have these kind of accolades is crazy. So
yeah, we'll have to ask him. Like after like the 14th is just like, oh boy, another classic. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right? Yeah.
like loading up for a local derby. Like, here's another one. So just for BASS, Jay has been in the money in 165 tournaments. Let that sink in for a second. 165 tournaments. Bass fishes like 8, 9, 10, depending on the year, depending on if you qualify for the classic. 8, 9, maybe 10 tournaments a year. And he's been in the money 165 times. Over $2.5 million in career earnings between BASS and FLW, which on FLW, he was the Angler of the Year twice. He won the 2003, like ESPN does that thing every year, the ESPY Awards. He won the 2003 ESPY award for outs. I think it was the wording was outstanding outdoor athlete. 34 years as a pro fisherman. Let me say it again. Pro fisherman for 34 years. I mean, this is like the truth. Like people say this statement, but I believe that Jay will forget more about bass fishing than I'll ever know. And I mean that sincerely. I think that's probably actually a thing. And one of the coolest things, I think, I don't know where it stands in his hierarchy with so many cool accolades, but and being so decorated. But one of the cooler things, I think, on his list of accomplishments is he is in the Bass Pro Fishing Hall of Fame, the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. But I mean, that's pretty dang amazing. And then the last thing before we bring him on here, and maybe the number one reason we really wanted to have him on the podcast, because I've always been a fan of his, and there's a couple specific stories about him I want to get into. But I found out about this not too terribly long ago. I don't know how I hadn't really known about it before. But one thing we really want to talk to him about is his work with the Cast for Kids Foundation. So ladies and gentlemen, we are so honored and surprised, honestly, to bring in Mr. Jay Yelas. So, hey, Jay Yelas.
Hey, guys. How are you, Jordan and Nate?
Hey, sir. Great. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing awesome.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be your guest and talk fishing and Cast for Kids, whatever you want to talk about tonight.
All right. Yeah. Let's do it for sure.
Sure. Yeah, it's an honor to be on your podcast. Thanks for having me over.
Thanks, sir.
Be your guest, and there's all kinds of stuff to talk about tonight. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, we're stoked for it. I think honored might be a little bit of a stretch with our podcast, but we do appreciate it for sure. So, we've got all kinds of topics for you. Well, not a handful of topics for you.
Yeah.
Tonight for this episode, but I think we're going to start off with kind of our hook,
kind of what we do,
and that's tacos. So we're gonna jump into some taco questions with you, and we'll kind of see where things go from there. So.
Yeah, so our podcast is called Tackling Tacos because it's like two things that we're actually passionate about. We love fishing, we love tackle, and we love eating tacos. So we're like, let's just make a podcast that's combining the two. So you live in Lincoln City, Oregon. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, actually, we moved a couple years ago, live over by Salem, Oregon, now the state capital.
Okay. Well,
But-
doggone it, because I looked it up, and I don't know if have you ever heard of Super Oscar's Mexican Food in Lincoln City? Have you heard of that place?
Oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah, he's got great soft tacos. You'd love
Yeah.
it. If you're in the neighborhood, stop in there.
Yeah, I looked up
love
online. I looked up your what was listed as your where you live, your hometown, and the name Super Oscar's Mexican Food was the highest rated Mexican joint. And I was like, that's the coolest name I think I've ever heard for a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I've
Super
been there
Oscar.
a few times. Good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome.
That is for sure. So are you a fan of tacos like we are? I hope the answer is yes, but we'll see.
Yes, I'm a fan. I'm not a gourmet fan. I mean,
Yeah, that's all
but
right.
I enjoy them. There's a little taco truck down the street. We stop by and get lunch from time to time, and those little three little soft tacos with
yes, sir,
whatever kind of meat and some little salsa on there or pico, whatever.
Yeah.
Some parsley or whatever different garnishes they put on. They'll squeeze some lime. You got to squeeze some lime on there too.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
That is go-to for sure. Heck yeah.
Yeah. My oldest daughter is she'll be 14 on the end of this week. And whenever we go to a taco restaurant, she asks for extra limes. Like she'll have if she has 3, let's say steak tacos with just whatever, she'll have 3 whole limes and squirt the entire lime.
Wow.
I'm like, honey, geez Louise. But yeah, it is good though. It does add to the flavor.
Yeah. But that's my
really
favorite. Good. Yeah, I love those soft ones better than the hard shells.
Yep, same. My man.
Yeah, they're dynamite.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So you say the street style are your favorite. Do you have a number one or a go-to meat or taco overall?
Oh, probably the steak. Just that's probably. But I like them all.
That is the classic.
Chicken. I mean, they're all good. Yeah, they're all good.
Steak for sure. The classic.
I've never met a taco I didn't like. So
that's the quote right there. There's the promo for sure. That's it. Do you cook at all, Jay?
Oh, I do cook a little bit, but my wife is a great cook, so I don't get in her way too much.
Yeah.
But it's something we enjoy doing together from time to time. And now that I'm retired from the pro bass circuit, I'm home a little bit more and I can do a little bit more of it than I used to when I was traveling all the time. So I've been enjoying that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How long have you been retired, sir? 2 years?
Just last fall.
Fall.
1 year. Yeah.
1 year. Okay.
At the end of last season, I
knew it was recent.
Yeah. At the end of the 2022 season.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, like you said, you traveling all the time. What was your kind of go-to meal when you were on the road doing all that traveling?
I would always had some roommates that we'd always when we could, we rent a house and we come in and grill every night. We like to do ribeyes a lot, but we mix it up and have pork chops and chicken. But we always got a grill and that was pretty much it. When you're fishing all day and you get in late and it's after dark, you know how it is. You're hungry. And you want some throwdown food. So we'd light up the grill and throw some potatoes in the microwave and get some salad together and try to eat as healthy as you can because it's that tournament grinds hard on you. You can't eat junk food. It helps your performance over a week's fishing every day when you're out there every single day to try to eat well. So that's what we would typically do. And going out to eat is always an option, but dang, it takes so long sometimes that you're exhausted. You want to eat and just get ready to go to bed and get all your gear ready for the next day.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I had a lot of good times. I roomed with Scott Canterbury the last 7-8 years, and before that, Mark Davis back when I was fishing.
Okay.
When he started fishing MLF, but now that guy's really good. But Mark's a good cook, but Canterbury's really good on the grill. He would bring, he'd bring some little deer tenderloins wrapped in bacon and jalapenos.
Okay.
He'd grill those up. That guy's a grill master.
Yeah. So is that why you roomed with him? Because of his chef ability?
Oh, heck yeah, that's why.
That's absolutely why. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I see him. I see him on a lot of Scott Martin's videos that he puts out.
Yeah.
He's typically the one heading the grill when they're when they're
Yeah.
back at camp or back at the Airbnb or whatever. So
Yeah. Those are a good bunch. Him and Scott and Matt Airy and Scott
Mhm.
Martin, they room together nowadays, and they
Yeah.
have a good time with it. They're all great guys.
And they're all pretty good at fishing.
Pretty good, darn good. Yep,
Yeah,
they sure
yeah.
are. They're all very, really accomplished, and that's who I cheer for now when I'm watching the Elite Series events.
Mhm.
You know, your old roommates, you got to cheer for them. So
Yeah, for sure.
but there's a lot of great guys out there.
Yeah, there really
That's
is.
for sure.
Let's take a hard turn real quick if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
So from tacos, because I don't want to like force it, but I really want to talk about just cast for kids stuff in your life and whatever. But before we get into all that, this is gonna sound maybe more profound or deep than it has to be. But like, who are you? Like, what things really matter to you, Jay? At the end of the day, like, what do you stand for? Like, what's the things that makes your heart beat?
That I appreciate that question, Jordan. That's something that people need to ask themselves every day, and kind of define who you are and what you stand for and all what you believe in and your worldview. So I'd say first and foremost that I'm a child of God, a Christian, and that I got saved back in February 28th of 1993.
Wow.
Was when I gave my heart to Jesus and asked him to forgive me for my sins and kind of fell in love with him. And I've been serving him and trying to get to know him better ever since. And God he's awesome. So I'll say that. And you never stop learning and, reading the word and trying to have a active life with, other believers and stuff and prayer life. It fascinates me, and it's just you can never get to know all of God because he's just so infinitely diverse and complex. But you can simplify it all down to that he just loves us all so much that he longs to have a relationship with us, which is incredible in its own right. But we
that's for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I would say. I was, first of all, and then my career was a professional bass fisherman for, like you said, 34 years. And that's growing up. That's all I ever wanted to do was go fishing every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every day. And so I was able to do that. And thanks to living in this great country.
Yeah.
So I'm an American professional bass fisherman. And now, I'm retired from that now. And I run the Cast for Kids Foundation now, which is a nonprofit charity that shares the joy of fishing with special needs children all across the country. And so that's what I'm doing now that I'm retired from the tournament trail. I just love it because it's a chance to give back and introduce these less fortunate kids that would never otherwise have a chance to catch a fish. Introduce them to a sport that I've always loved and been passionate about, and give them an opportunity to go out and have a good time.
That's beautiful. Let me hit you with a quick follow-up. Kind of the confluence of bass fishing and God. I've always had a pretty firm belief in God and Jesus and whatever. And I find maybe it's because of how I'm wired. I find that I sort of see God more when I'm out in nature, when I'm fishing, when I'm bow hunting and I'm sitting in the woods for hours on end, not seeing anything, but just the peace of it. Does that resonate with you at all?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The creation is marvelous. And especially in this country, I've traveled to a couple other countries, but there's so much to see in North America. It's just amazing. Mm-hmm. And we have, from the Northwest where I live, I have traveled, thankfully all over the country bass fishing for 34 years, but from the Florida Everglades to those, the lakes in the Adirondacks. And then you got the Midwestern lakes and desert lakes in Arizona, the lowland lakes in Texas to the Northwest and the rivers. I mean, it's incredible. And you can, yeah, you can definitely see God through His creation and the way everything's just so harmoniously balanced, perfectly balanced, and the sun and the moon and all of the wildlife, and He provides food for all of it, and the Bible talks about how He even knows about all the little sparrows and how many hairs are on our head. And I don't have as many as I used to, but He knows the exact number. The exact numbers. I totally hear you. I love being out. There's nothing like a beautiful sunset. I mean, there's nothing like it, and it just takes your breath away sometimes. And you wonder what life will be like when we move on from this world. What heaven will be like with the sunsets, and if there is a sunset, maybe, who knows? But it's going to be amazing. We get little glimpses of it here from time to time. That's for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome for sure. So you mentioned your love for the outdoors. Do you have a recollection or remember like when that love started, like an exact moment or point in time where being outdoors or being a professional fisherman is what I want to do?
I caught that vision in high school. But I can remember the first bass I ever caught was at my grandfather's lake house, standing on his dock, throwing a jitterbug out to the left on the left side of the dock. That some of your younger fans might not even know what a jitterbug is.
I love the
jitterbug. Old school topwater lure.
Yeah,
and I was like
awesome bait.
It was like a 13-inch largemouth bass, but I still remember that. And I was probably about 5 years old, and I remember still when I was 5, my other grandfather taking me out on a charter boat in the Pacific Ocean off the Oregon coast. And I can remember what the boat caught that day. I remember how the wind changed directions from north to south, and it kind of messed up the currents and in that were out there, and that was a little tougher than we thought. But I ended up getting one fish and the boat got 2. And it's just, isn't that amazing that most days of a person's life come and go and you'll never remember them again. But boy, some of those days on the water or out in the woods hunting, you remember it the rest of your life. And it's just, there's something fantastic about it and so when I was a little kid, I always loved it. And then I started really getting into bass fishing in high school. This is way before, this is like in the early 80s. I graduated high school in 83. There was no high school fishing, college fishing.
Right. Yeah.
You just went fishing because you loved it and had a passion for it.
Right.
And I remember in high school, I went to high school in California, and bass fishing is not a big deal out there like it is in Alabama. There's a lot of great fishing in California for sure.
Yeah.
And especially for some big fish, but it's not a big part of the culture, and it never has been. So I remember the first time I told my mom and dad I was probably a junior in high school, and I said, they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "A professional bass fisherman," and they laughed. They didn't know what it was.
Oh yeah, they probably didn't even know what that meant. Yeah,
no, they didn't. They're like, "Well, that's okay, son, but get your college degree first, just in case."
That's cool. Yeah,
but that's and it's a lot different nowadays. Kids grow up. Heck, they got tournament trails for middle school kids now.
It's crazy.
It's way easier to get into it, and it's more popular than ever, which is great because it's a fantastic activity and sport for young people to get involved with, and it can be an all-consuming lifelong passion if it really grows and somebody really enjoys it. But that's kind of how I got started.
That's awesome. How did you, if it wasn't really as common back then, which it clearly wasn't, how did you even know that a Bass Pro fisherman was a thing?
Bassmaster magazine.
Okay.
Yep, and that's how. And then the awesome. Bassmaster TV show.
Yep.
And that was my only growing up out west. That was my only link. There was no internet back then.
Right.
In the early 80s. We were a long ways from the internet. All you had was Bassmaster and I'd get all the fishing magazines back then. It was, Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, and I think Operation Bass, which became FLW, they had a magazine called Bass Fishing. Okay. But anyway, back in the 80s. But I'd get all those but it was tough because you couldn't get. you couldn't even get tournament results until the darn magazine came out like 2 months after an event was
so
over.
Crazy. With. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I didn't, as a fan, I didn't know anybody that I could just call and say, or text and say, hey, who won? Right. Now it's just, it's right there on your cell phone. You know, you can watch the standings and everything's so easy now to follow it. But that just shows what a love for the sport I had to be that far removed from bass fishing, living out, growing up in California and Oregon to make a career out of it. So I was pretty determined, and it's something that I really, really wanted to do.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. What is something about you that most people might not know? And I'll give you a little bit of like a point of reference. The most unexpected answer we've had to this question, I think you would agree with me here, Nate, was when we asked Brandon Polinick what's something about you people might not expect. And he said, I love dancing. That was not what we expected. What is something about you that maybe people wouldn't expect or don't know?
Well, I don't love dancing. So that's
but hey, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love to fish for other kinds of fish besides bass. And I live in Oregon. We've got some great like steelhead fishing, salmon fishing. And I love fishing in the ocean. You know, we go out and catch halibut or tuna out there. And so I do way more of that now that I'm retired than I used to, but I do way more than bass fishing now. And so somebody might think, oh, professional bass fisherman that's retired, he probably just still goes bass fishing 3 days a week. But I don't. I go fishing, but I think it's the challenge of learning a new species and really mastering.
That's cool.
Other types of fish, and they're really good to eat. All those saltwater fish. So that's something I've really gotten into, is the saltwater type of fishing, and people might not realize that.
Yeah, that's really neat. Does your wife fish with you at all?
She does, a few times a year, but not too many. My kids go with me more. I've got 2 daughters that are in their mid-20s, and I still get to go with them. They're really special days when they get to go. But I got one little grandson that my oldest daughter has, and they were down around Thanksgiving, and my wife watched the grandson. I got to take my oldest daughter. She's like 27, but I hadn't been, just me and her in the boat in a few years, having a child and all. So that was pretty special day. And we caught we caught a bunch of salmon, and she caught some all by herself. It was one for the memory books. That's for great. Sure.
I love that.
Yeah, that's for sure. So would you say kind of like where your life is at now, how things are sitting for you, is kind of where you saw them or hoped they were going to end up, years earlier?
Oh yeah. When I started, I never dreamed I'd be a pro fisherman for 34 years, but that's how it ended up playing out. And I could have possibly retired a little earlier than that, but I still enjoyed it, and I was still competitive. And so I could still be fishing now. I mean, heck, there's guys that are fishing that are still competing that are much older than me. I'm 58 now, but but you definitely kind of lose your edge the older you get. And I think most guys' careers peak between, around 40 years of age, maybe 35 to 45, somewhere in there. Those are your best years. Nobody's ever really peaked after that, after they hit 50, for sure. That's just never happened. But yeah, it's fishing is just something that is in my blood, and I never get tired of it. What did surprise me, to answer your question, Nate, is I never dreamt years ago that I'd be running the executive director of the Cast for Kids Foundation. That's just an opportunity that God put in my lap. And I was interesting. I know it's kind of his perfect will for me at this time, because the way it played out, I was invited to be on the board of the foundation in 2005. And I was on the board for 10 years. And then when the executive director retired in 2014, the board was tasked with finding his replacement, and I ended up being something that I was interested in, after praying about it. And so since 2015, I've been leading the foundation, and I still fish from 2015 to 2022. I had like dual careers. I was fishing the Elite Series and running and the Cast for Kids was kind of small when I took it over in 2015, but it's like tripled or quadrupled since then. So it's a pretty much full time now. We've got like 7 employees, and it's like a small business, and it's so much fun. But it's fun to watch it grow and be a part of that. And then you get to work with so many wonderful people around the country. So being there now, I guess when I was 20 years old, I never thought about what I'd be doing when I was 58 years old. But I'm really happy where I'm at. I couldn't be more content. I love doing what I'm doing, and so thankful for 34 years as a professional bass fisherman, and then doing something now that I really enjoy that still has a lot to do with fishing. So yeah, life is good. God's good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were gonna try and to talk Cast for Kids later, but you're here, so let's jump into it. How did you find out about it, and then what motivated you to jump on board with it?
Well, like I mentioned, the foundation started in 1991, so it's been around quite a while, and 32 years. And so I was invited to be on the board in 2005, and I'd heard about it before that, but I didn't know much about it. So I was and so that's when I got really involved and active in leadership of the foundation. Was for that 10-year period from 2005 to 2015, being on the board of directors of it. So that's how I got involved. And then even when I was on the board, I never dreamt that I'd be running it day to day one year after I retired from fishing. But it was just God's plan is what I say it was. And I'm thankful, and I've embraced the role because it just kind of flowed naturally, and it just it's grown enough to where it takes 8 hours a day running the thing. So we've got it, and it deserves. It's such a great charity and such a positive impact on so many lives. It deserves somebody running it full time. So I've enjoyed that. And but just for your listeners, our website is castforkids.org, CASTFORKIDS, and our mission is to enrich the lives of children with special needs and support their families and strengthen communities through the sport of fishing. So we work together with volunteers all across the country, and they're like a one-day fishing event. Half of them are boating events, half of them are shore fishing events. Okay. And we work together with local coordinators in each community to plan these events out. And it's like you throw a big party for these special kids, and and it's such a big deal to them. I mean, they don't have events designed just for them hardly ever. And so when people all gather to like throw a party for the special needs kids in a community, the kids are just lit up because they're never the focus of everybody's attention. Most of the time they feel like outsiders looking in, but and so we find also that the volunteers just love sharing their expertise with these kids. And there's nothing better than watching a kid catch his first fish of his life and the big smile, the big grin they get. I mean, that would warm anybody's heart. And we get to go watch that happen every week. And so I feel really fortunate, to be able to experience that kind of joy in the children. And, one of our slogans is we bring joy to special kids. And that's basically at the heart of what the Cast for Kids Foundation does. And we do it through fishing, which is kind of fun too. There's a lot of other things that are great about the events we have. They're open to anybody that wants to come. You got to register for the event. And then we get people from all walks of life that come. And it's one of the few events that I go to in anywhere where everybody's welcome. You got people from, different backgrounds, whether it be race, religion, financial status, education. They all come together and they all have a really good time just trying to take these special kids fishing. And it's so cool. It's like heaven comes to earth for a few hours on a Saturday morning, you know, and all these folks that have big hearts for the kids in their community, they come out and volunteer, and they just take the kids out in their boat or take them fishing from shore. Wow. And they love it. And then we have, after they go fishing, we have lunch for everybody, and then a big award ceremony where each child is honored and celebrated, and we give them an award plaque with their photo in it, and they get called up. Yeah, they get called. Each child gets called up one by one to get their plaque in front of the group, the lunch group, and then they get to talk into the microphone, and everybody cheers for them. And sometimes some events they give the kids a standing ovation, and it just there's a lot of tears. There's a lot of big smiles and hugs at the event. So they're really special. For everybody in attendance, the kids, the parents, the volunteers, the sponsors. It's just a win-win-win deal. And so that's what I love about it. And so that's what we do. And so just, you know, you can, on our website, we had 94 events around the country this year. We didn't have one, you know, they're in like 26 states. So we're not in every state yet, but you can go to our website, and the schedule for next year is not published yet, but we'll get it up there, you know, probably in January, February, and you can search events in your community, and the schedule's up there from this year's schedule's up online. You can see if there's an event near you this year, and then it'll probably, if it'll be most likely around the same time next summer. Like if there was the first week of August this year, it'll probably be the first week of August next year, but we'll update those when they get confirmed in the new year. But so people can sign up. It's totally free to the kids, no cost to the families or children. Volunteers can sign up and come out, and or maybe somebody might be listening that would be interested in starting a new Cast for Kids event in your community, and get a hold of us. We'd love to help you put on a new event for special kids in your community. And trust me, it's a win-win-win deal. Everybody will really enjoy it. A lot of our events have been going 15, 20 years in a row. So. And that speaks to it speaks to the longevity speaks to how gratifying it is for folks. They want to have it again every year because it's such a positive event for their community.
That's great.
So so that's that. And it's there's a lot of great charities out there, of course, but we're, as far in the fishing space, we're the largest children's fishing charity that's out there, and it's been fun to be a part of it and watch it grow. And we got this year, we took well over 3,000 special needs kids fishing this year. So that's incredible. It was like, I don't remember the exact number, but it was a bunch. And we had, I think we had, the numbers are on our website. I can't remember them all, but I know there was the a special needs child will come to a Cast for Kids event with their mom and dad, and usually a couple siblings. So they all get to go fishing too. So it's not just the kids. Yeah. It's the whole, it's introducing families to the sport of fishing. And a lot of times people take it up and they pick it up as a family hobby. We had a family in New York this summer they wrote us an email after the event, and they're like, we came to Cast for Kids. We'd never been fishing, but we had such a great time. We went home and bought a boat.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome. And now it's a hobby for our whole family. So
that's really neat.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's a good time, and we'd love to grow it. I mean, there's sky's the limit. There's so many kids out there, and there's so much water, and so many, big folks with big hearts that to help make it happen. So it's fun watching it grow and giving more kids an opportunity.
Yeah. So one of the questions I had, you kind of answered it, was like, what kind of motivated you to to take ownership of this foundation or want to be the head of it? And I think it's pretty clear the passion and the love you have for it over the time that you were on the board. So yeah, that's awesome. So
what, when you're tournament fishing, well, let me back up. Fishing, there's so many ways to enjoy the sport of fishing. You can do it. You can go fishing in tournaments. You can make a career out of it. You can fish buddy tournaments, club tournaments. You can fish with your kids. You can fish with your spouse, your grandparents. You can fish by yourself. It's all fun.
Right.
But if you're out there tournament fishing, it's like for my career on the Bass Elite Series, it's all about you and what you can catch.
Right.
And it's just that, and that's a great way to enjoy the sport of fishing is tournament fishing. But like I just said, there's a lot of other ways to enjoy it too. And so I really love the fact that with Cast for Kids, I'm able to spend my time sharing the joy of fishing with less fortunate kids that would never otherwise get an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so that's really what drives me is just it's somebody that has been so passionate about fishing their whole life. I've done so much of it for myself. I want to share it with other people.
Yeah. Your website you said is castforkids.org, correct?
That's correct.
If you go to that website, so in kind of preparation for this podcast, of course, I was looking into the foundation, and on the homepage of the website, there's like a video that plays in the background, and there's one shot of this young man with Down syndrome, and there's a big bass, and he like kisses it on the belly, and I'm awesome. Oh, my heart, dude, it's just so sweet, and
there's lots of moments, like that.
So not to get into like me, because this podcast is about you, but a long time ago when I was about 20, which feels forever ago, I was a sort of the layman's term for us. I was a social worker in Wisconsin, and my specific job was to help cognitively impaired adults live independently. So not in group homes, not under constant care, but with some assistance, whatever. And I'll never forget, I had one. We were supposed to call them clients, but I just called them friends because they were all so cool. I had one guy named Peter, and he was like 40 something, and he had Down syndrome, and he was just short as could be and just cute as a button and constantly happy. And every time I would knock on his door, he'd say, "Jordan," and he'd just give me this big hug. And so again, not trying to make it about me, but when I saw that video of that young man kissing that bass, and then I thought of Peter, and I'm just like, oh man. So if somebody wants to get involved, Jay, with Cast for Kids, and I sincerely hope they do, how can they do that? Can they just, if they don't have time to physically volunteer, can they donate? Can they volunteer? Like, how does that work?
So people, there's a donate button on our website, and that's always great. But what we really want is to have new events to introduce more kids to the sport of fishing and share the joy with these kids around the country. So come out and volunteer at an existing event or start a new event in your community. And if you want to do that, reach out to us. And the foundation, we do a few events. We have like a staff of 7, and the 7 of us put on, I don't know, a dozen events or so by ourselves. But we're like, I live in Oregon, so I can't start an event in, Colorado. I live in Oregon. So we rely on local people. And like, if you're in Denver, for example, we have an event in Fort Collins. We'll just use that for an example. So we work with local volunteers in Fort Collins, Colorado, to put on an event there at Horsetooth Reservoir. So no matter where you live, we can work with you to help you plan the event out. And then we offer so much. People could do these events by themselves, but they don't because of the expense of doing it. We have, we've got all of our waivers for that people have to sign during registration to assume all risk, and then we have our attorneys wrote all those up, and then we have a big insurance policy at our events that covers that, and we have online registration, and there's just all the expertise of planning them out after 32 years that it's something that folks could do, but they find it's a lot easier to work with folks that have done this for 32 years, because we've kind of ironed out the process and really know how to do it. So Yeah, just get a hold of us through the website.
Okay.
You can. We have an Eastern Regional Director and then we have a Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma Regional Director, and then we have a Western Regional Director, and those guys will help you plan a local event, and depending on what part of the country you're in, and then we always attend the event on the day of and help make it go smoothly. And but yeah, or you can just register as, like I said, as a volunteer or a participant. If there's some families out there listening to your podcast that have a special needs child, we'd love to have you come out to a Cast for Kids event. It's totally free. The kids all get a free rod and reel and a tackle box,
awesome.
and an event T-shirt, a hat, and an award plaque with their photo in it.
Yeah,
and
cool.
a lot of good memories and a lot of love from the local community. So it's totally worthwhile. We look forward to seeing you at an event this summer.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's great. Nate, you got any other questions about that? I really wanted to touch on that. It's just such a cool thing.
Yeah, thanks.
No, yeah. I think he hit on about everything we could ask. I mean, that it like you said, just the memories alone that foundation that makes is special for sure. So
yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be a cool combo to sort of like partner up, bass clubs with something like Cast for Kids. Like if like where I fish, Chippewa Valley Bass Attack, like if we kind of helped team up with Cast for Kids and ran an event, like that just seems like that could be a cool partnership and an easy one all over the place. Like you could do Harvester Bass Club, Nate, in the Quad Cities or whatever.
We have a lot of bass clubs around the country that put on their own Cast for Kids event. It's a great it's a great outreach. It's a natural. It's just a way for the club members to give back to their community.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty common. We see quite a bit of that.
Man, I love that. All right, well, let's go to fishing. All right, can we pan over to some fishing stuff? I could talk about this stuff all night, but I do know people. We're talking to Jay Yelas right now, so we got to talk some fishing stuff
for sure.
Yeah, heck yeah. So, it seems like you're really known for being a versatile angler. You've been in the game for a long time. What would you say is your favorite technique, your favorite way to catch them?
Oof, that's a good one.
Well, I like catching bass any old way, but if I just had to go out, fun fishing, I think over the years fishing either a spinner bait or flipping up shallow is just that was what I always really, or throwing a square bill. I really love fishing shallow. It's kind of old school, but that's when I started. I started fishing in the early 80s, before the live scope came on the scene.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. One of the Angler of the Year titles I won, I caught almost all my fish that year on a spinning rod.
Wow.
And that was like 20 years ago, and finesse was starting as a big trend back then, but whether they were sight fishing or drop shotting was just taking off, and shaky head worms and stuff like that. But I was always able to go back to the spinning rod if I needed to catch them, but I'd much rather throw a big spinner bait around or flip a big jig. That's what all the tournaments I won, they were always on a jig or a spinner bait. Some of like I mentioned, the Angler of the Year titles, they were always a mixed bag of different things. Like you'd expect when you have a 10 tournament season, you're going to catch them on, whatever you have to throughout the year.
Yeah. So you're not that guy. You're not that guy who's like married to one specific technique. You're like, whatever I got to do to get them, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, so back in my day when I was fishing, we had guys that were experts at one technique, like a Denny Brower.
Right.
Yeah.
And, he would fish a jig, win or lose. He didn't care if he didn't catch him, and he usually did, and he won probably more tournaments than anybody.
Yeah.
And you'd have guys that were specialists. Fritz had his crankbaits, and Clun and KVD had his crankbaits, and then Brower with the jig, and Biffle, and some of the guys were, Jimmy Houston and Guy Aker would throw spinner baits all the time. And I was never that way. I started fishing. I had a good friend in high school. We'd go fishing, bass fishing for a day. And my buddy would throw a white spinnerbait all day. And then I would have like 8 rods on the front deck with 8 different baits on. And that's just who I have always been as an angler, is just somebody that was always curious about what the best mousetrap would be that day, to get them to bite in. And I think that played into my hands as a pro all those years, because I was always pretty consistent. I didn't win a lot, but when I, like you mentioned, I made 16 classics in a row. And then when I moved from Bass to FLW, I made a bunch of FLW cups consecutively. And you have to be versatile to consistently catch them. And it's, the sport's changed though big time since then. Now it's all about forward facing sonar. It's a totally different conversation, but we'll keep our conversation to how the fishing was during the most of my 34-year career.
What's your favorite square bill, Jay?
My Lucky Craft, the BDS3 was always that, or the 2.5, but the BDS3 probably would be, if I only could get one. But I mean, the 1.5. But what I liked about Lucky Crafts was they would always run true. Out of the box. Now the one I started with, and it's still a sleeper. I still have a bunch of them. Is that Bagley, the Balsa B?
Yeah.
Takahiro made that famous in 2004 when he won the Classic.
Right.
Lake Wiley on that bait, but man, we've caught some bags over the years, and not many people would throw that Balsa B3. It has a little square lip, big, like a DB3 size body, and they don't make them like they used to. They don't have the baits that come out now. They're just not the same. But the old ones that had the line tied down right by the bill, those are the ones that had that good. Those big ones. The big fish would eat that bait, and it was a big fish bait for sure. But I love square bill fishing too. That's so much fun catching them that way.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite way to fish, I think, if I had to pick one. Especially when you start throwing a square bill. And I couldn't agree more on the Lucky Craft. I have a boat full of Lucky Craft 3s and 2.5s, and the fat CBs and just different variations. They always ran true, and they always had really good hooks right out of the package. But when you start throwing a square bill like on Rip Rap or Cut Rock, and you can feel it, thunk, 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 bang, and to me
that's one of the favorite ways to catch them too. And I've like the shallowest one I ever used was a baby 1-. You ever fish that one much?
Yeah. Okay. So I caught really quick the Mans. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. The Mans.
Yeah. In Texas, we would fish tournaments when I used to live in Austin. We would have tournaments, not a lot of them, but in the dog days, we'd have tournaments from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. because it was just so ungodly hot during the day that it was bad for the fish. It was bad for the fishermen. And I was throwing a Mans. It wasn't the baby, but it was the Mans 1-, little bigger one that had 300 BBs in it. I mean, it just sounded so loud. And that was almost a wake bait. Like, it didn't really get down, it just kind of, and I caught a 7-pounder in the dark. And in the dark, catching a 7-pounder on that, you would have swore that I hooked into like the Loch Ness Monster, I mean, I love those baits. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I still got a few.
Yeah, I remember the key to that baby 1- was you had to throw it on 12-pound line or it wouldn't get out of sight. I mean, you had to get it to run a foot deep. You had to throw it on 12. And the only problem with that is those great big ones would suck it in so deep. Sometimes their teeth, when you're playing the fish, their teeth would cut that 12-pound line. I had a couple of those nightmares during big tournaments over the years. But so from that was the shallowest diving crankbait I ever fished, the baby 1-, and then all the way up to, the Balsa B4. That's a bait that they haven't made that in years, but that was bigger than the Balsa B3 or the BDS4, the big Lucky Strike.
Yep.
I mean, Lucky Craft baits. And then, Strike King now makes them like this big, square bill. So there's all kinds of, but that's such a fun way to fish.
It really is.
Heck yeah. Do you have a go-to spinnerbait or jig? You said that was kind of the number one. So like.
Early on I was well, I'll just say early on, the Stanley spinner baits were what I threw early in my career, and they came out with that wedge blade like in the early '90s. That it was a willow that was tapered.
Yep,
and it had a lot of
yeah.
It had a lot of vibration. The most, and I still, but even to the day I retired, I threw that when I was throwing a willow. I would throw the wedge, the Stanley wedge willow, just because it had more. It moved more water, had a wider loop to it, but probably depending on the water clarity in rivers or stained water, my favorite was always like a number 3 Colorado and a number 7 Indiana. Okay. And that bait, I won that Bass Superstars tournament on that like in 1995, and ever since then that was a favorite. The Colorado, Indiana, and dirty water. The tandem, the tandem willows in clear water, or a Colorado willow in clear water. And in all the years I fished, it's hard to beat a chartreuse and white skirt or a white skirt. I still wonder, even after 34 years, I wonder if those aren't the only 2 colors of spinnerbait that guy ever needs.
Right.
I don't.
That's so true.
I've had times when black was good with like a single Colorado blade when the sun was out. You wanted something that not quite so bright. I've had some good catches on black, but that was a rarity. It's usually, and then we'd use painted blades sometimes in real muddy water, but most of the time it was either gold or silver. But I've had some good catches actually on white blades. Yep. In mud, like a little orange Colorado in front of a white Indiana blade in mud. But that's just such a fun way to go bass fishing, to just pick a spinnerbait up and just throw it. And there's a lot of times when they're just on a moving bait in that muddy water and they won't touch a flip bait. And then there's other times they want the bait flipped and not fishing at a jig or something slow, and they don't want the spinner bait. So it was always just a matter of figuring out which they want. Did they want a bait flipped, or do they want a moving bait? You go to a spinner bait or a square bill in that situation. And to me, that's the epitome of bass fishing. That's how I learned how to fish and did most of my damage over the years was, 5 foot of water or less, dirty water, and with spinnerbait, square bill, or flipping. And first bass tournament I ever won was on the Potomac River in Maryland, and that was, tidal fishery, so it's all shallow water, 5 foot or less fishing. And that goes way back. Anyway, I'm rambling on and on.
I love this.
Now it's all about looking at them on your computer screen and dropping it on their head, and that's just I never did get into that. I can see why it's so effective, but to me that's not fishing. I like going out, like you mentioned at the top of the show. I like looking around. I like seeing the scenery and the sunset and the birds and what's going on, and looking the wind blowing through the trees. And I do enough staring at a screen on my phone or on a laptop.
Yeah.
But every big tournament's won now with forward-facing sonar, so I don't doubt the effectiveness of it. But I just choose not to. I probably would catch a lot more fish if I used it, but I just fish for fun, so I like to catch them the way I like to catch them.
Yeah.
The last few years of my career, I will say, everybody went to the offshore, and it left the whole shoreline pretty much void of tournament boats, and you can get some pretty good fishing. We had a couple of years ago, we had an elite series at Lake Fork in the fall, and Patrick Walters won it live scoping on standing timber with a jerk bait. But I got third in that, way up the river, throwing an old spinner bait.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
A square bill, and there was nobody up there. It was like me and Steve Kennedy were the only 2 boats fishing up. We had the whole river to ourselves because everybody else is looking at their live scope. So it wasn't like you had to do that, but that's the deal now for the young kids coming up, learning how to bass fish. You have to get not just good at it. You've got to be the best at reading your screen and really utilizing that as the tool that it is to find and locate and catch bass, because that's the future of bass fishing.
Yeah.
As far as tournament competition, but like we said earlier, there's so many ways to enjoy fishing. You don't have to fish that way if you don't want to.
Yeah. Jay, you ever get into catching smallmouth? Have you ever fished smallmouth in schools using spinner baits? Because I've done that a few times. My mom lives on a lake just north of where I live called Holcomb, and it's a pretty well-known smallmouth area, but it can be tough because it's about finding them. But once you find them, if you burn a spinner bait, or not burn, but really break it through there pretty quick, I mean, they will pull the rod out of your hands. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's my favorite way to catch smallmouth and then we've been doing that since the late 90s.
Yeah.
And even on the Great Lakes, the St. Clair and Erie and those places, they'll come up and hit a spinnerbait. And we've had a lot of fun to catch the big ones. The big smallmouth will get that. But I think it was 2 years ago, we were at St. Clair for an Elite Series in August, and I'd never tried a chatterbait on smallmouth. But burning a chatterbait. And so I ended up getting a top 10 there, catching. I had a couple, some good tournament, and using a 3/4 ounce chatterbait, which is a heavy. I mean, 3/4 ounce is a heavy one. With the Yamamoto Seiko trailer, white on white, and bomb it out there and just reel it like a foot deep. Or really, it's about as fast as you can. Maybe not quite as fast as you can, but you're humming it just under the surface. And they wanted that chatterbait way better than the spinnerbait. And I caught way more fish on that. And that's when I realized, dang, I should have been chatterbaiting for smallmouth all these years, because those suckers like a chatterbait too.
They really do.
Yeah, so try that on that lake.
Yeah, we do. My wife Lola, who we talked about it earlier, couldn't be on tonight. That's her favorite way to fish is with a jackhammer. She will throw a jackhammer in places where it doesn't make any sense and outfish everyone. And she'll burn one. She'll throw 1.25 ounce like the Big Daddy one, like the real heavy one. Get it deep, and there's all kinds of different ways to throw that dang thing.
Yeah, that's the best one. That's the one I used to throw. It's it's worth the extra money.
Yep.
It's designed right. It's the best mousetrap for that type of lure.
Yeah, I like that. Hey, Nate, we're talking tackle with Jay Yelas right now. That's kind of cool.
That's awesome. Heck yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so Jay, you fished a lot of derbies. Is there a couple, for whatever reason? It could be a win. It could be something sentimental. Is there a couple of them? Let's exclude the Classic for right now. But is there a couple tournaments in your mind that really stand out, that you just really remember, you have great memories of?
Oh, there's lots of them. And the Classic is actually the most memorable. The most dramatic fish I ever caught was in the Classic, when I had that pontoon boat run across my spot. And I looked at the cameraman. I had a live ESPN camera in my boat, and I said, it would take an act of God to catch one now. The pontoon boat just ran right over my spot. It was like 4 feet deep.
Yep.
And I threw out there next cast and caught the big fish of the whole Classic. So I was kind of hard not to give God the glory when it goes down like that.
Yeah.
But besides that, I don't. Gosh, there's so many of them. I remember the first time I ever won a boat back in the old days of Bassmaster at the invitationals. They would have boats as prizes for the top 3 finishers in the tournament. And I remember winning a boat once, and what do you do with a boat when you already have a boat that you're pulling your truck? So you got to have to go rent a truck to haul it somewhere, but I didn't have a driver for that. I would have had to pay a driver. So anyway, you end up just dumping them on the site. So I remember this is fun. It's kind of pitiful, but I remember selling a brand new Ranger boat to a guy cash on the site for $15,000
wow.
This was in 1991 or 1992 on the up in the Northeast. But I know that boat now is probably worth $50,000.
Right.
Yeah,
it was so expensive, but that was, I don't know why I remember that. That was just kind of a dump but I was kind of in a spot there. I mean, what do you do when you're
right? Yeah,
a long
yeah,
ways from home and you win a boat? And I was young and I didn't have the connections to call a local boat dealer and say, hey,
Sure.
can I leave this there? But I don't know. I remember the year I won Angler of the Year, I caught catching a 10-pounder on a spinnerbait at Lake Seminole in Florida. That was the biggest bass I ever caught on a spinnerbait in a tournament. And I remember the biggest stringer I ever caught in a tournament was at Lake Toho the year in 2001, the year when Dean Rojas set what was, I think it's still the record of 5 fish, 45 pounds.
45 pounds, yeah.
I think it is. Yeah, he's got that mount in his house.
The second day of that tournament, I only had like 15 pounds the first day. So every word got out after he caught that huge bag. They were on beds. So I didn't find any beds in practice, but I just went back to the places where I'd been bit in practice and started looking around, and it was like Disneyland. There's a 9-pounder here. I caught a 9.6, and then 20 minutes later, right just down the way a little bit, another 9-pounder.
Oh my gosh.
And then like 20 minutes after that, I come across this bed and there's this giant sitting in there, and I pitched a tube in there twice because I'd caught the 9s on a tube.
Okay.
And it didn't even flinch, didn't even look at the tube. So I picked up, I had a black lizard with a chartreuse tail, 6-inch. I pitched that on that bed, and that fish went right down on it, and she sucked it in, and that was an 11-11, the biggest bass I ever caught my whole life.
Yeah.
And that was
incredible.
That day I ended up with like 36 pounds that day, but I didn't have the big fish that day, and I didn't have the biggest stringer that day either.
Oh my gosh.
So, but my mom was the only one that still remembers that, being her. So
I think I'll remember it too. You know what's funny too? Do you remember this, Nate, at the tournament we fished this year with the LaFonts? Easton kept on throwing a Carolina rig. Do you remember I gave him a bag of Zoom lizards that were black with a chartreuse tail? And I said, throw this fish, eat it. And he's like, I'm not throwing that. And he never did. Well, now I have proof. I have proof that they'll
bite that. Yeah. Well, it's interesting how that fish never even looked at a tube. And then I reeled straight in and threw right. I had a lizard rigged on another rod, and I pitched it right in there, and she just lit her up, man, and she just ate it right away. So there was something about that bait that fish liked. But anyway, there's just some memories from over the years. I
love that.
Yeah, somebody brought in a 12-pounder that day, and Lake Toho, Florida. Boy, it can be it's kind of a feast or famine. It's not a really. Sure. It's kind of a hard place to catch them when they're not biting, but boy, you hit it right in late January or February, and those big ones are up. It's amazing. It's cool to see a 9-10 pounder on a bed and have a shot at catching it. It's pretty special.
Yeah, to watch a near 12-pounder engulf your lure, my Lord.
And so here's the rest of that story. Prior to that day, I'd never caught a bass over 8.5 pounds in a tournament.
Oh my gosh.
And then I catch 3 over that in a 45-minute stretch. And I was just beside myself when I got that 11-pounder in the boat, put it in the live well, and I just started cracking up laughing. I couldn't even fish for like 15 minutes. I was just laughing hysterically. It was like the best 45 minutes of my life bass fishing. And so great memories, over the years. And not all the days fishing are great days. Sometimes you have – sometime like the last time we were at Lake Champlain a couple years, 2 years ago, I guess, I was running all the way down to Ticonderoga from Plattsburgh, and it's like a 60, 70-mile run, big wide open lake, and ran down there the first day and caught them good. And the second day, the forecast was the same for winds 5 to 10 all day. So I run down there and catch them pretty good, and about noon the wind starts blowing out of the north, and it just starts picking up, and the white caps start building, and next thing you know, it's blowing like 30, and it's just this huge storm blows up, and I've got a 70-mile run through that stuff.
Jeez.
And and I had a good bag that day and a good bag the first day, and what do? I mean, I ended up just about destroying that boat. I made it back, but I was late getting in, and had to stop and pick up Kyle Welcher because he'd broke down, and I was glad I got him in on time. He was in a later flight, but I mean, the ride was so rough. Yeah, it's like 60, 70 miles pounding in, like, not super huge surf, but like 3 and 4 footers.
Yeah,
And it was,
that's
anyway,
a long ways in that.
all my graphs, all the screws came out, the brackets, they all came flying back, and the whole trolling motor, just like all the screws and bolts came off, and it came flopping back in the bottom of the boat.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was a horror show, because you're going like way too fast in big water for 70 miles. And I mean, I just destroyed the boat. Thank goodness there's service crews at those tournaments. That it wasn't all glorious being a professional bass fisher. There's a lot of you fish through a lot of inclement weather. Yeah. And so anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I'll stop right there for now. What else?
That's pretty incredible for sure. Being a tournament guy who follows the scene, we've heard about that run, many times, but to hear it, straight from your mouth is pretty.
And it's so frustrating, because the forecast was for 5 to 10, and usually forecasts are pretty darn good these days, and meteorologists can get it. And so otherwise, I'd have never gone down there. Yeah, nobody would make a run like that if they knew the wind was going to blow 30 at noon that day. They would. And there's a couple other boats down there, and they just said the heck with it. They didn't catch them very good, so they just went to a boat ramp, called the tournament director, and said, have somebody drive my trailer down here. Pick me up. I'm not making the run back. But
and then they look behind them, and there goes Jake.
Yeah, there goes the old man. And anyway, that was it's a lot of fun, though. All in all, it's a great career, and it's a lot of hard work, a lot of traveling, but you have to really love it to do it because of that. But it worked out great for me. I'm real thankful.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's for sure awesome. So, you having the lengthy career that you did, can you speak on like how sponsorship stuff has kind of changed over the years, like how it was like early on to like nowadays? Not nothing specific, but like how easy or hard it was 30 years ago to what it was the last couple of years.
I think my timing was really good in the sport, because I started fishing bass in 89, and the sport, look how much it grew from 89 through now, last year. Yeah. And so I got in it during a great growth stretch, and so the sponsors were pretty easy to come by, because times were good and companies were growing and making a lot of money and selling a lot of boats and fishing tackle and all that. And but over the years, I think it's become so diluted. When I started, there was only bass. That's the only pro tour that there was. And now, of course, there's 2 pro tours, and there have been since the late 90s, 2 pro circuits. So you have twice as many fishermen, and they're all competing for the same piece of the pie. So back when I started, in the late 80s, early 90s, there was only, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 guys that were like at the top superstar fisherman type levels. I named a bunch of them earlier. Mm-hmm. Brower and Nixon and Clun and Jimmy Houston and all those guys. But now there's so many more. So I found over the years it got tougher, just because the dilution of having 2 pro circuits, but a lot of that probably has to do with once my career peaked, and then it kind of the last few years I didn't perform as well as I had earlier on, and so there was the sponsors weren't quite as good as they were during the peak years. But all in all, it was that's really how you make your living as a professional fisherman. You can't count on your winnings every year to pay all your bills, and everybody has good years and bad years, and the sponsors are your steady income that you need to because it costs a lot. It's a very expensive
Yeah.
lifestyle because you're traveling so much, and then and you got to have all the the inventory and equipment to do it. So, but yeah, I had great sponsors over the years, Skeeter Boats, and I had and Yamaha, and I had a lot of different sponsors actually over the years. I started out with Berkeley. I was with them for about 20 years or so. And I was with Yamamoto Baits the last several years for soft plastics, and I was on the Chevy Pro staff for a while back when they were big sponsors. They got out of it. They're just a marketing decision. Probably one of the more frustrating things guys will find is in the sponsorship world is when you have these companies, the manufacturers, they change their marketing people from time to time, and you'll get some new marketing guy that comes in.
Different ideas
they have different ideas and priorities, and so you just get, through no fault of your own, you're just like the Chevy guys. We had a strong team for years. I mean, Larry Nixon was on there, and Brian Thrift and Jimmy Houston, and they had a bass fishing pro staff for years, maybe decades. I don't know. And then they got a new marketing guy that decided they wanted to target inner city men with their marketing budget instead of outdoorsmen, and it was just gone. I mean, they just cut the whole thing. And so, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that when that happens. It's totally out of your control. So the fishing companies are more consistent for longevity because they always have to do marketing and fishing.
Sure.
But the non-endemic sponsors, they can come and go, and they may be a real sweet deal for a few years, but they might have a change of guard in the marketing department, and they might decide bass fishing is not the best place to bet for the bang for their buck. So it's all good though. It's tough. One of the keys to sponsorships is that the top fishermen need to hold the mark. We don't have a union, so the top guys need to keep the bar way up here. They can't settle for a sponsorship for a bag of plastic worms and put the company's logo on their jersey. If they do that, everybody else is in trouble. The top guys, they got to get top dollar for that, sponsoring that plastic company that makes that bag of worms, and then it works its way down for everybody else. So the onus is really on the top anglers to hold out for making the most they can to keep it fair, to keep it equitable for all of the other fishermen that are out there. So anyway, I was a part of that for several years, and then had some highs and lows with sponsors, but it's just part of the game. You got to have them.
Wow. That's really interesting.
That's awesome. I never really looked at it in that sense of like how the the top guy kind of
sets it.
Sets the bar, and then it kind of trickles down from there. I never really looked at it like that, but that makes a ton of sense. So
some guys do a great job of that, and then others, they don't. They're fantastic fishermen, but they're not businessmen at all. Kind of a country bumpkin type, and they're like, "Yeah, man, I'll put your logo on my jersey for free worms." And then they end up winning everything, and they're like, and then the next guy comes along and tries to get a small retainer fee, and they're like, "No way, we're not even paying." He does it for free. So then everybody's, but all in all, it's worked out pretty good, and it's a great industry. A lot of wonderful people in the fishing industry.
Definitely,
it's always fun to go to the Classic or the ICAST show and see everybody.
This is not really in the same wavelength, but kind of. Give us a couple tips, Jay, on breaking down and figuring out new water.
Okay, that's really at the heart and soul of what a professional bass fisherman does, and it can really well, all right. Let me answer your question first. I could go off on some rabbit trails, but
Please do.
So it's a combination of knowing what the fish are doing with the seasonal patterns that should be taking place, and then knowing what your skill set is as an angler and what you're most confident in, what you're the best at, what you're most proficient at, what you like to do is usually a good way to answer that question.
Sure.
With what you're really good at doing. And then you kind of, then you just start. This is, I guess it's an old school answer. This is a pre-live scope answer to your question. The post-live scope answer is you just go out and look at your screen all day. Don't fish. You just troll and motor around and look for fish like you're sight fishing.
Yeah.
But so the pre-live scope answer is it's really more of an art. It's kind of an art and a science combined. And that's why I think a lot of those earlier fishermen that learn to fish without front-facing sonar are your best fishermen, because if you took the front-facing sonar away from everybody, those are the guys that would just really shine in the tournament.
Sure. Yeah.
And the guys that learned to fish in my generation just by savvy and intuition and experience, and just get a gut feel for, something should be going on over here. That looks good, and I need to fish that. But yeah, so you have to have number one, understand seasonal patterns, bass migrations, what the food chain's doing, what should be working this time of year, what the fish should be doing. They start there, and a lot of times it takes 2, 3, 4 days to really get dialed in and figure it out. And you want to, and then the other part of it was learning who you are as an angler and what you're good at, because you can't do it all. For an example, if you go to a lake and everybody there, it's known as a jerk bait lake. Boy, you got to fish a jerk bait, if you're going to do good there this time of year. Well, if you don't like fishing jerk baits, there's no way you're going to beat somebody that's really good at jerk bait fishing, that's done it for years and years. So you need to figure out what you like to do, and try to get really good at that. And that's one way to look at it. And then the other way is to just pick an area and have 8 rods out on your deck with 8 different baits, and just fish all through that area of the lake with everything until you figure out what's going on and what the fish are doing.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's more of a versatile approach. And like, for example, if you, like when we'd go to a tournament back when I was, back in my younger days, pre-live scope, you'd have a guy like Denny Brower with his jig, or Fritz or KVD with their crankbaits, and they would go out and practice, and they would just crank. That's all they'd have out is crankbaits or jig or whatever their specialty was, and they would just fish that way until they found them, because that's what they like to do. And if there was let's just pick one of those. If there was Brower and a jig, if there was a jig bite going on, Denny would find it early on, first day of practice, and he'd be able to develop it, really refine that pattern and the part of the lake, and he would be dialed in on day one. He'd go out, take a big lead, and then he'd just finish it off. Now, as a versatile guy, if you go out the first day of practice with 8 rods on your front deck, and you got you do have a jig rod out, but it's just one of 8 different lures. Eventually, you're going to find that jig bite if there's a good jig bite going on, but you're going to be way behind Denny, who started with a jig.
Yeah.
And you'll end up doing pretty good in the tournament. You'll make the money because you found the bite and you got some good fish on a jig, but you're not going to win the event. You might get a top 10, but you'll probably get a good high in the money finish because you figured it out. And so that's kind of that was always usually the approach that I took, and
I like
that more versatile approach where you're gonna find the bite because you're open to anything that could be going on out there.
I like that.
And you're versatile enough to catch them with a drop shot or whatever you need to, top water, and so that's one way to look at it. And then the other way, another example is that I've used several times when you break down a big lake, is to just pick a couple areas of that lake to look at in practice and just forget the whole rest of the lake and just forget it.
Yeah.
And if they catch them there, that's fine. But it's kind of like it's kind of like a baseball hitter. Most of those guys that are really good, they sit on certain pitches.
Yeah, they sell out to a fastball or whatever. Yeah.
And they strike out a lot. But most of your home run hitters or the really good guys that hit for average, they're going to get their pitch and they're going to execute on it. So you can go to a lake and you can guess. That's how, when I won the Classic, I just picked the river on that lake, and I spent my whole practice period within like a 6-mile section of this river. I never even looked anywhere else. I didn't even fish the whole rest of the lake.
Wow.
So I put all my eggs in that basket, and that ended up being where the best bite was on the whole lake.
Yeah.
And I got my pitch and I hit it, to use the baseball analogy. So that's the other way you can do it. Sometimes you're going to, guess wrong but you can, if you take a big creek arm of a lake or something, there's good fish that live there. You just got to figure out. I made more often than not, I would do well with that approach. And the approach where I would fish in that creek for 2 hours and I run 10 minutes to another creek for 2 hours. This is in practice. And then I'd run 5 miles to another spot for 2 hours. That is not the way to practice for a tournament, because you're just fishing you're like nostalgia fishing, or you're fishing where you caught them 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
Instead of dropping the darn trolling motor and just fishing and figuring out what the fish are doing now. So that's, if you have there's a lot of knowledge about our lakes and if you're in a good area and, or an area that has potential to produce big bags. And so that's, on the big lakes, that's kind of how I would approach things. And then the other thing that worked for me a lot too was I would figure out what the bite should be and what everybody else is going to be doing, because the tournaments are always won that way. And I would do something totally opposite.
Yeah.
And man, if you can find them, you have them all to yourself. And you can't, that bite's not always there. But I remember the most glaring example was we used to go to Kentucky Lake in June for big tournaments. And the tournaments are always won cranking or fishing a jig or whatever on ledges. Yeah. Always. And I had on Kentucky Lake, and I would run over to Barkley Lake, and I would literally have 20 miles of that lake all to myself.
Wow.
And then the flipping bite, the shallow flipping bite around logs and brush and stuff, it'd be wide open, and you wouldn't be catching 20 pounds, but you could catch 15 to 18 pounds every day. And I didn't win, but I had a third one year doing that and a fifth one year doing that.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's a perfect example. And I wouldn't see another boat all day. And now you can go looking for bites, off the wall bites. You kind of fade the conventional wisdom. You can look for that a lot of times and you can't find it. But when you do find it, it's always the top 10 because you'd have it to yourself and you don't have to share fish with other contestants. And that sharing fish it's really hard when you have to share a spot to have it hold up for 4 days, because those tournaments are 4 days long.
Yeah.
And there's very few spots that have enough fish to share that for 4 days to win on it. But anyway, you guys, I'm enjoying talking about all these.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Bass fishing. Now, like I said, this forward-facing sonar has just changed all that, because it's like sight fishing now. You know how it is when you see them on beds, and you just, to prepare for a sight fishing tournament, you just put your trolling motor on high, get a good pair of sunglasses, and you just go down the bank and you mark as many fish on beds as you could. Then you come back and catch them in the tournament, and that's what the guys do now with forward-facing sonar. Is they just do very little fishing in practice. They cover tons of ground looking for them on their electronics.
Yeah,
and so that's a totally intellectual style of fishing compared to what the art and science of fishing that I was just talking about. Two totally different styles of fishing, and And with a new style with the forward facing sonar, you have to be the best with the technology. Period. Yeah. That's what you just have to be better than everybody else with technology, and learn how to read that screen and what you're looking at and interpret what you're seeing on that screen, and then learn how to get those fish to bite. But the sports, it's really changed a lot. It's fascinating to me that it's changed that much over the years, but that's what we're dealing with nowadays. And
Okay.
Yeah. So aside from the forward facing deal, if you had to pick, we don't have to get into anything super lengthy, but if you had to pick like maybe one or two things that separate a good angler from a great angler, what would you say that would be?
I think a lot of it's, there's two things. One, it's a God-given ability. Some people have a natural talent for fishing. Trust me, it's no different than hitting a baseball or pitching a baseball. You just have it. There's a God-given gift for finding and catching fish. And then the second thing is having the passion and the work ethic to get the most out of your potential. You'll find all the great anglers, they had a tremendous love for the sport, and they would work so hard at it to really perfect their game. And that's what really separates the great anglers. But there's a ton of hard work alone won't do it. There's a ton of guys that work their tail off, but they don't have that gift that some people just are blessed with, and they're the ones that you see at the top every year. Just a natural ability. It's just that's all you can say, and it's just as real in bass fishing as it is in any other sport. So, but you can't just have the hard. The old saying, the hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Yeah.
So you got the talented guys, they've got to put their time in. So, but that's what separates people.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. That's the Paul Nicks and the Jordan Lees of the world. For
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. For sure.
For sure. Yeah. Those guys are gifted, very gifted anglers.
Yeah. In your opinion, Jay, what's a bigger accomplishment? And you have a beautifully unique, ability to answer this question. What's a bigger accomplishment, a classic title or an Angler of the Year title?
Well, I think the biggest accomplishment, I can answer that. I'm going to answer that two ways, because the biggest accomplishment was to win Angler of the Year. Yeah. But if I had to choose one of them, I'd choose the Classic any day.
Okay.
Because the Classic is it's the big show.
It is.
It's the granddaddy of them all. It's our Super Bowl. And there's a big, besides just a tournament, there's a huge outdoor show going on in a convention center right next door.
Right.
Where they weigh the fish. And everybody in the bass fishing industry is there in that city that day. And so it's a big family reunion of the sport, and that's what makes it so special, is that everybody's there. Whereas with Angler of the Year, that concludes at the final tournament of the year, and there's several thousand fans, but the industry has not gathered there at that last event of the year. So, but it's by the anglers. The Angler of the Year is more well respected because it's probably harder to win. But if I could just choose, I would pick the Classic any day over Angler of the Year, just because of that was just a career defining moment. And even you today to introduce me at the top of this podcast, the first thing you said was a Classic champion. Yep. So I mean, that's just it's the main deal. It's like winning the Super Bowl. It's like it was something I'm so thankful for. To get a shot to do that once is just amazing.
Yeah. Huh. That was a really cool way of summing it up, sir. How you said for the anglers, AOY is like, wow, because that's an entire season, a grind, all the travel, potential boat issues, weather, all the things you can't control, and yet you still fish consistently. Or did you have, not necessarily lucky, because I don't really fully believe in that, or did you just have a really good 3 days? So there really is a big difference, but they're both kind of incredible.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier with the whole pontoon deal at the Classic,
gosh.
which is absolutely wild. But
Yeah.
you have any other like major memories from that Classic in 2002?
Yeah.
That was on Lay Lake, wasn't it?
Yes, Lay Lake
Yeah,
near
Lay Lake,
Birmingham. Yeah. So I remember there was a couple things I remember a lot of things actually. One of my favorite memories, dearest to my heart, was my girls and my wife were with me, and we were all in a hotel room there, right there at the Sheraton, right by where the weigh-in and the tournament were at. And I was leading after 2 days, right? There's a 3-day event. So right before I was going to bed after the second day, and we all of us, my wife and my daughters were like, at that time they were 6 and 4 years old. And so we go to bed, it's all quiet and dark, turn the lights off. And we were laying there for like 10 minutes. And my oldest daughter, who's 6, she sits up in her bed and she says, "Daddy, don't worry. God just told me you're going to win the Classic."
Oh my gosh.
I'll never forget that.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, how do you what can top that? And then I went out. She's pretty amazing. She gets some downloads, and but anyway, and then I had so many dear friends that were there to get to share that with, and my whole family was there, like I said, and one of my good buddies, when I weighed in, he was so excited. He was in the stands. Then he's a pretty big guy. And he said he jumped up so high and he came crashing down into his seat that he broke the seat. That's a story. That's a great memory.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And and anyway, it's hard though. I can remember, back then they would provide all the boats for that were provided by Skeeter that year, and and the trucks were provided by Chevy, and everybody had an identical boat and truck, and you would have a driver that would drive you to the boat ramp in the morning, and it was like a 45-minute drive. And we would have, being the leader, I had a outdoor rider in my car with me, and he just we're driving to the lake the last morning of the tournament, and I'm it's 3 a.m. or whatever, 4 a.m. and I'm trying to get focused on competing that day and getting my mind ready to go, and you're just having to do an interview the whole time on the way out there,
man.
And and then the cameras and stuff, and it's just that speaks to the how hard it is and exhausting it is to win that, because you'll see. I remember that year Cliff Pace won it. He was so spent that he could hardly even smile.
Yeah, barely even speak. Yeah.
Oh, he couldn't even talk. He just leaves it all out there. And you're getting like 4 hours sleep every night because they have dinners and stuff and sponsor obligations, and then the media. And so I mentioned that just to speak to the, what a grind that thing is to endure. It's like a marathon. You got to endure for a week. It's only a 3-day competition, but you're there in town for some practice days and media days and stuff. So that's, it's definitely a hard work, and you definitely earn it. But yeah, those are some of my memories that I remember. Well, the pontoon boat story is the best one, I've talked about. But we had that last morning of the tournament. I had ESPN was filming that, and they had a helicopter. They had a camera guy in a helicopter.
Remember that? Yeah.
So I'm up there. That was slow that last morning, and I'm up there trying to fish, and there's a helicopter filming me, and the guys, all the weight from the helicopters, the water's just all getting blown around all around my boat.
Oh my gosh!
And you got white caps from the helicopter on the water, and I'm trying to fish. And I'm like, my camera guy's like, "Man, it's like trying to go out in the woods and hunt deer with a band following behind you playing. It's like finally the helicopter left, and some of the spectator boats cool off, and then Alabama Power started running the water jet.
Yep.
The generator started going, the current started moving, and the fish started biting that last day. But there were some anxious moments. I think I only caught like 4 fish the last day, but I had a 5-pounder and still won by 6 pounds. But
jeez.
Anyway, that was I had a 10-pound lead going into the last day. So anyway, I still didn't catch a limit. So it's still, the door was open a little bit there, but
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the best things was when I got home after that, all my friends and back then I lived in Texas, but one of my friends threw a surprise party for me. And we had one afternoon I was walking with my young daughters down to the swimming pool in our neighborhood. And I start seeing all these friends or people I knew drive by, and they'd like wave, and I've got like beach towels and my kids' little inner tubes and stuff, and we're walking down the street, and finally we go for a swim, and I come home, and my wife's like, "Hey, we need to run down, our so-and-so just called and invited us over for a quick meal. Let's go down there." And I said, "Okay." So I got dressed, and we went down there, and there was like there had to be at least 100 people there, friends from all over East Texas had come, and there was a huge surprise, and they threw a big party for me. That's what it's all about. If you don't have somebody to share something like that with, it's not really worth a hill of beans.
Yeah.
So it's so fun to be able to share it with family and friends afterwards. And I appreciate you guys asking these questions so I can relive some of those fun times.
We love hearing it. I have a couple kind of specific follow-ups, Jay. So number one, what did you say to your daughter when you won? The one who told you that you were going to win?
Oh, I just said, yeah, you were right.
You were right. Yeah.
You were right, Hannah. You were right. You definitely hear from God. That was great. Because she's actually done that a few other times since then. And she has a gift, a prophetic gift, you might say. So,
okay. Yeah.
But yeah, she's a special young lady. But what was your other question?
Well, now that you said that, now I'm like kind of seeing it sort of funny in my head. Like if you guys are in bed before like the 4th day of a tournament and she doesn't say anything, like you just put it on the trailer, just call it. Didn't say anything. So the other question I had was just the specificity of it, the pontoon thing, and you're in this area where you're waiting for the whatever you call it. Was it a dam? I mean, whatever.
Yeah, you're right below a dam in a tail race
through, but it's not always pushing. And then this pontoon, just about how on God's earth did you not just, I know you're a man of faith and I respect the fire out of that, but how did you not lose your stuff right there?
That's part of the key to being a good fisherman, I think, is to just keep on an even keel. And there's so many bad things that are out of your control that can happen during a day, and you can't let it ruin your day or get to you or alter your focus. And but that's a glaring example when a guy, he ran right by my boat so close I could have reached out and touched him with my rod, and ran right over that spot. And I said it would take an act of God to catch one now, and I flipped out there and caught the biggest fish of the whole tournament. But yeah, that was cool. And every time several years after that, under my breath when I'd cast my jig out, I'd say, it would take an act of God to catch one. Right. Come on, it never happened again. Just
redo it. Yeah.
Redo. Yeah. Let's have a redo. But no, that was, I think that's a key. Composure is a key component to the mental makeup of any sport. Yeah. I love baseball and I follow it a lot, but if you watch pitchers, if you ever see a pitcher lose control of his emotions,
it's over.
He's over. He'll be out of the game. Yep. 1 or 2 more batters, he's gone, and he can't. You have to maintain that composure and that focus. And so that competing in the moment, totally focused on what I was doing, and you just have to block that stuff out. And I think I kind of joked and laughed about it and said, made light of the situation, and then it was, God blessed me with that 6-pounder. So that was pretty cool.
Do you ever, like in your 34 years of competing, did you ever spin out on the water?
I don't remember. I remember having altercations with other anglers where we'd both be fishing the same spot, and we'd get some heated arguments over who had the right to fish there.
Was it Biffle?
No, not with him. He was never still. He was always going down the bank 100 miles an hour flipping. He'd never flipped the same bush twice in a day either. He's wide open. But what happens a lot in tournaments is you'll have, and these situations always get worked out, because at the end of the day, the guys realize, hey, that stuff just happens as part of the game. You'll have one angler that'll go to a good spot in the morning, and he'll catch his fish the first day of the tournament, and he wants to save them for the rest of the tournament, so he leaves. And then at noon, another angler comes in because he'd found those same fish also, but he didn't think that it was his best spot. It might have been his third or fourth spot. He comes in there, and he catches a big limit. And then the day 2, they both start there in the exact same spot. And there's no written rules of etiquette in that situation. I mean, both those guys legitimately have a right to fish there in that situation. It's different than if you see somebody fishing a spot and he's catching them, you don't ever go back and fish that spot. So, but no, to answer your question, I don't recall ever really losing it emotionally and spinning out and just losing my head and screaming. And that's just not my character or personality. I don't do that in other parts of life either, besides fishing. And it's, after all, that would be the last place I do, because it's just fishing. After all, there's always another fish to catch around the corner somewhere. So it's not the biggest deal in the world. But that's
wow.
Well, I could talk to you guys all night. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
This was awesome.
I think we'll let you go on that one, Jay. We wish nothing but the best for you in the future. And I highly encourage anybody who is watching this, listening to this, if you can't be boots on the ground, make a donation, do something to get involved. One thing about Generation Y, Generation X, whatever you want to call kind of some younger folks in the world, is a lot of us are looking for a cause to get involved in, and I think this is a pretty worthy one.
It's a good one
for kids.
Thanks. Cast for Kids, and castforkids.org, and you can just Google it. It's the first thing that pops up. So I appreciate you guys highlighting that tonight. It's been a pleasure talking about some old fishing memories. And let's do this again maybe next year sometime, and we'll talk about some other stuff.
We're gonna hold you to that. All right, thank you so much.
This has been such a great conversation. We can keep going for like 2 more hours, but
you're probably right.
I'm gonna get some water.
My wife might not be too happy about that. But Jay, thank you so much for joining us. So you can go ahead and hang up, and we
guys,
appreciate you so much.
All right, you guys have a great one. Thank you so much.
Good night. Yes, all right. Thank you.
Golly, we just talked to freaking Jay Yelas, dude. Like the whole time he's talking, like there was not a singular function in my DNA that was like, come on, dude, hurry up, get done with your
no
response.
Not at all.
Like this is Jay Yelas,
single
dude.
bit of it was amazing.
I'm just absorbing and listening, and even at the end there when he said that thing like there's always another fish to catch. What the you're talking about the classic, like we ain't talking about practice.
Right.
Not a game.
Somebody almost literally crashing into your boat, and we'll be all right. We'll get through this. And just
on the third day, wasn't it? Wasn't the pontoon the last day?
I think it was. Yeah.
I was gonna ask him,
second or third, but
I always heard it as the third, but it's like just imagine that. Let's say that you're in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, and the water boy runs up to give you a squirt of water and pokes you in the eye with a Gatorade bottle. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? And you're like, well, there's always another football to throw. Or like
Yeah.
what? How on earth do you not? And the fact that I was like, you ever spin out? And he's like, I can't remember ever doing it. What? I need to just hang around that dude. I need to
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
sit there
That's
and like just
amazing.
listen to him and absorb his piece. Cause like that is, man.
Yeah. Yeah. He
What a
was definitely a guy to have on, to in a testament to our positive vibe. We always try to
yeah,
hold
dude.
on this, man. That was sweet. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a great comparison too, because he's spot on. Baseball or even, football, really any sport, when you see those dudes start to get like super like it's over.
Yeah.
Especially, and I think he nailed like the example. Pitching is just such a between the ears act. There's so many things you can do wrong and not that many that you can do just perfectly. If you start getting in between your ears, it's over before you even throw the ball. And it's so
Yep.
true in
100%.
fishing too, dude. Like, me, Nate. Like, I don't really get super spun out by the fishing usually. Like, I'll just get super frustrated sometimes. Like, if I get a backlash and then I lose like the custom balsa crankbait one cast later, or I go to grab a rod out of the locker and it's hung up on 15 rod sleeves, and it's like all these little intangible things back to back to back. And I know dang well that's like, there's like this emotional, intellectual, like constipation, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And Jay Yelas is the absolute perfect example of when it does work, as far as like staying positive, staying peaceful, like what can actually come out of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, they say the bad things always come in threes, and we've seen them on the water time and time again. But yeah, being able to keep that calm and a woo-saw, as they say, and
So
yeah,
hard.
I might start calling it Jay Ellison.
I mean, yeah.
Just call it that.
Yeah, we're gonna close every show, instead of saying positivity is worth the effort, we're gonna say, all right, everybody, Jay Yelas.
Right, exactly.
We'll just say that. That'll be a little weird, but I mean, geez Louise, man. So Nate, hit us with our sponsors, and then we'll close on up shop. But what an awesome conversation, and like to hear the specificity on lures and blades for crank or for spinner baits.
Yeah.
Like I said, sort of like jokingly, not jokingly, like this dude will forget more than I'll ever know. He's just barfing out such high level
100%.
specificity on some fishing stuff and water clarity and how to reel what out, man. And the fact that even up until last year, he's placing top fives.
Yeah.
And this is a dude who obviously, isn't a fan of forward facing sonar. So he's doing it like his way, the way that he fishes, and he's still putting in top fives, like until he retired. That's wow.
Yeah, it's a testament to the skill set that he gathered and carried on through his career. It's very, very impressive. So
yeah, just wow, dude.
But yeah, so before we thank the sponsors, I want to thank the listeners, everybody who's hung out with us through this episode. It was it was a good one. Tons of awesome information from exactly, there you go. Tons of great information from Jay, and we appreciate every single one of you who hung out and listened. Listened with us. So because that's really what we did, was just sat back and listened to him go on. So it was awesome.
In the best possible way. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you guys, and of course thank you to Kenai and Grizzly Coolers, for sponsoring us and hanging out with us, letting us talk about you guys on a weekly basis. We appreciate that. Hook and Arrow Supply Company and Giltech Jigs, all the great things that they do with the Bowtech service there at Hook and Arrow Supply, all the great Giltech products, jigs, hooks, baits, everything that they
everything
got
he
going
puts
on
out is thought through and super intentional.
Yep, I'm so stoked to get my hand on some more of those swim baits for this upcoming season. So
they're so good. Yeah.
Hey,
real quick, as I interrupt you pointlessly, do you ever tie a, what do they call it, a loop knot?
Oh yeah, where it can like free swing and move.
It's like the old school. I remember as a kid, man. I don't know why whenever I think of fishing as a kid, really often my brain goes to the original Rapala floater, like the 3-hook, and I always go to bright orange. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that as a kid, but in those, they always had like a little pamphlet that you could unfold and it would tell you like knots. And wasn't one of those in that pamphlet? Wasn't it? It might not have been a loop knot, but isn't that what they called the Rapala knot? Like a free swinging knot?
I think it might have been. Yeah, it was in that little plastic case in the back of it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I can't put my finger on exactly what the different knots were that were on those. Might have to find some old cases and pull that up. I bet I have some
Atkins was
somewhere.
talking about using a loop knot for a ball head jig with a swim bait, and it got me thinking. Like that makes an absolute crap ton of sense because on a swim bait, it's not just the tail. Like a good swim bait, you get the body rolling back and forth, and then as the tail kicks, you get kind of like the combo of the two. And if it's on a loop knot, the head rocks back and forth, and then you kind of get the and I think if you put it on a loop knot, that makes sense that it would do that even more, right?
Heck yeah, I would have to think so. Yeah,
I got to try that on a Giltech one.
That is smart. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, shout out Giltech. Go check those guys out. Yeah, and of course, the Working Class guys, Working Class Bowhunter Podcast Network.
Yep.
All the shows that they have with Victory Drive and of course Working Class. With the Hunt Files as well.
And Drury stuff.
And the Drury stuff that they have going on. So tons of awesome content to soak up through their network. So go ahead and do that at Waypoint TV. They've got it all there. So
yeah, for sure.
That's it, man.
Yeah, Lola, we missed you tonight.
We did.
You would have. I think you would have just been so good with Jay because he's just such a cool, smooth, like just very passionate, sort of like not Southern, but he's got this way of speaking that's so calm and chill. And I think Lola would have vibed well off that. And he's just barfing out knowledge left and right. So we missed you, Lola. And remember, everybody, man, if there was ever an episode that just typified this motto of ours, it was this one.
Absolutely.
I truly believe had Jay Yelas not had this mindset, he might not have won that classic, because you spin out and the gears grind and you just don't think straight. You make bad choices, bad actions, bad results. They all kind of come together, like
absolutely.
What's that phrase? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You spin out, you get mad, you make a bad choice, bad results happen. Jay Yelas stayed calm. He stayed positive. He won the classic. So remember, no matter what you're up against, even in the face of an evil pontoon, positivity is worth the effort. We will catch you on the next one.
Peace.
Bye-bye.